Howdy friends, and welcome back to the channel. I'm out here with my son. We're taking a break from work and homeschool, and we're going to do some snowshoeing around the backyard. And while I was out here, I noticed that my rose hips look pretty awesome, even though they're frozen. So I think we're going to make something tasty with them today. So I actually have a lot of rose hips that I didn't get to harvesting. So we're going to take a close look and we're going to make sure that we're only harvesting ones. Okay, so like that one there, that's gnarly. Don't harvest that, okay? But if you think about the fact that many of us use frozen fruit, I can easily work with some of these rose hips, not all of them, but a lot of them actually look, sorry, it's really sunny today. There we go, really decent. And so what I think I'll do is after we're done snowshoeing, I'm going to harvest the ones that look really good and bring them inside so we can infuse them in vinegar. So super quick tip for you. If you want to work with frozen rose hips like I am, you can also just work with dried for this recipe. I'm also going to be working with some frozen aronia berries that I have in my freezer. Anything really works. But if you're going to work with ones like I do, you want to make sure that you slice them in half and just make sure there's no mold or anything growing inside of them before you go and infuse them all in your vinegar. So of course I'm going to carefully check them all before we make anything. But like I said, you know, if I had just harvested these and froze them solid, it's pretty much what nature did for me, right? So let's rock and roll and see how this turns out. All right, and we're back inside after some snowshoeing fun. I have my, there's snow on my bowl, my rose hips. I just harvested them with some scissors, and when I was out there, I cut a bunch of them in half, and I didn't have any mold or mildew inside, so that's great. They are perfect to use, but remember, you can also use dried rose hips if you want. But let's get down to the nitty-gritty of why I'm going to be infusing these in vinegar in the first place. Raw apple cider vinegar has a lot of really amazing health benefits. But before you go ahead and you do what I'm doing today, just make sure you do your own independent research. I am not your herbalist. Okay? I'm not a doctor. I want to make sure that you're sure that none of this is going to interact with any health protocols you have with other practitioners or with your medications. But that being said, I've really been enjoying using raw apple cider vinegar. No, this is not the same as canning vinegar, okay? It's got to be raw with the mother intact, which means that it is technically a fermented product and it's alive. It has beneficial digestive enzymes, yeast, and bacteria that can be really, really good for gut health. And as a herbalist, I love to infuse herbs into my vinegars. Can you drink just regular raw apple cider vinegar? Of course you can. There's nothing wrong with that. But if I can have the added benefit of something like rose hips, which are high in polyphenols, anthocyanins, otherwise known as things like vitamin C that are anti-inflammatory and antioxidant, why wouldn't I? Another berry that I really like to use are aronia berries, and this is actually a batch of raw apple cider vinegar, aronia berry, infused magic that I made this summer. And as you can see, I'm running low. And what I like to do is I have a mason jar, just an empty one like this. This is 1 liter. I think that's a quart for my American friends. I think it's a quart, I'm pretty sure. And I like to put a healthy amount of vinegar in there with some lemon juice, and then I just top it up with water. Sometimes I'll add electrolyte powder, and that'll be something that I sip on all throughout the day. And so this is helping to support and balance gut health. It can be really good for things like bloating and digestion. So any of those functional digestive symptoms that people have. It can actually be really good for things like acid reflux too, which, by the way, is actually an indicator that you don't have enough stomach acid, not that you have too much. Remember, not a doctor, do your own research, but those antacids might not be doing you any benefits. There's also tons of research to suggest that raw apple cider vinegar is great for heart health, weight loss, all sorts of things. So there's a lot of reasons why we would want to be using this product. Okay, so for my friends at home that really like measurements and ratios, Sorry, I don't have any. This really couldn't be any easier. And sometimes it's when we get in our heads and we think that we have to do things a certain way. You really don't. When it comes to fresh fruit, so in this case it's frozen, I'm probably going to fill the jar about halfway. With my rose hips, I'm going to cut them in half first before I do that, just to make sure, again, that I don't have any weird mildew or anything. This is because I'm harvesting them in January, right? And we've had a lot of like weird freeze, then thaw, then freeze, then thaw kind of weather here in Ontario. So I'm just being extra certain. With my aronia berries, I'm just going to go grab them from the freezer and fill up about halfway. I'll probably let it thaw for 5 minutes or so, and then I'll show you the rest of the step, but really I'm just going to kind of pound them, release some of the juice, put some apple cider vinegar on top, and call it a day. All right, so I didn't quite have as many fresh rose hips as I would have liked, so I actually topped off with a bunch of dried as well. So generally speaking, when you're using dried herbs compared to fresh, dried herbs don't have water content, so you can get away with using a little less. I would fill the jar anywhere from half to about a third with dried herbs, but again, you can use more, you can use less. This is very much folk herbalism here. With fresh herbs, you want to use more because you're kind of compensating for that water. And then I'm just going to use this muddler, which I have used for years with aronia berries, so it is stained purple, and I'm just going to smash, hard to do, there we go, right? And I'm just releasing some of the juices from the rose hips. And then from here, I'm just going to put that down. I'll pour a bit of my vinegar in, and then I'll smash again. I don't have anyone here filming for me today. My son's busy working on a project, so I don't want to keep bugging him. But you can kind of see where I'm going with this, right? Smashing and releasing as much of that juice as possible, and then filling up the jar all the way with vinegar. Now this process of like muddling my herbs or kind of mashing them up isn't necessary, but I find that it kind of speeds the infusion process up a bit. My aronia berries are still quite frozen, and so it's going to be a bit before I can smash those down. But it helps to release the juices, so you're also getting some of the juice from the berries as well as the medicinal properties. The one thing I will say is that you are going to be straining out your berries afterwards and disposing of them. Specifically with the rose hips, if you've ever tried to eat a rose hip before, those seeds are like rock hard. You will absolutely chip a tooth. So just be forewarned about that one. And you can see, like, look at that. I've already got such a really great mixture. And all I'm gonna do is top it off with my vinegar. How easy was that? Now, if you don't have plastic lids like I do, this one says rosehip vinegar. If you don't have plastic lids, you are going to want to use a piece of parchment paper between that metal lid and the contents of your jar, because the vinegar will eat away at the metal. And there's nothing worse than opening up some beautiful medicine that you have just made or food like an infused vinegar to find that you've got bits of metal flakes inside of your end product, because if it were me, I would just be throwing that out. So now that I've done that, I'm also now just going to give it a really good shake. See, a lot of those berries are like smashed down at the bottom. One question I get a lot too that I don't necessarily have the answer to, Correne, is every type of rose hip edible? I think so, but it's really important that you know what type of variety of roses you're working with, so that way you can be absolutely certain that they are safe to eat. I like to grow rugosa roses because they are the closest cultivated rose to a wild rose, and I couldn't find wild rose seedlings here in Ontario for sale, and so I went with the rugosa rose. It's super low maintenance, and it doesn't actually look like the cultivated rose at all. You should do a quick Google search of that one. Again, low maintenance, blooms, and like without any work from me, not a lot of pruning, and the rose hips are edible. Now I really want to quickly talk about aronia berries. They do kind of look like blueberries, don't they? They're not. And they don't taste anything like blueberries. In fact, they're not really a great berry to just pick off a plant and eat due to their really high astringency. And this astringency is what makes them kind of a superfood. And they're sort of like our locally available superfood because they're hardy, I believe, to zone 3. They're also called choke berries, not choke cherries, not the same thing. And I've done other videos on these guys before because I've fermented aronia berries and I've done a lot of really fun things with them. You can add them to things like a strawberry jam or a raspberry jam to help increase that polyphenol and anthocyanin property. But like I said, they're quite astringent and even a little bit bitter on their own. So if you wanted to make like a syrup or something from them, you would probably have to add a bit of a sweetener. They're a lower shrub, so not really getting much more than about 5 feet tall. So they don't take up as much space as say like an elderberry. And they have really pretty white flowers. The berries are prolific. The birds want nothing to do with them. So you're not fighting over the birds. And then the leaves turn this really pretty red color at the end of the season. So are there some berries that I wouldn't do something like this with? You betcha there are. So because I'm consuming, and this is I've got a bit of an electrolyte powder in there too, but I've got lemon juice, my aronia berry vinegar, and because I'm consuming something like this every single day, I'm going to want to avoid berries that are more potent immune stimulants. The reason for this is that we don't actually want to stimulate our immune system every single day over the winter. And I know this is counterintuitive to the way a lot of people think. And I've actually done a video on this, the difference between immune tonics and immune stimulants. Immune stimulants are powerful and they work over short periods of time. So I want you to think of them as like your marathon runners, and then they peter out. And so you're not getting the benefit that you think you are by stuffing your face full of echinacea and elderberries all winter long. Those guys, in terms of stimulating your immune system, probably stopped working a month ago. What you want are immune tonics. So I'm going to post a link to that video so you can know the difference between the two and how to appropriately use them so that way you're getting the most benefit from them. Also, our body tends to adapt to things pretty well. And if you take immune stimulants every day, when you actually need them, they don't really work as well. So something like elderberries, I would not do. Now, if you just wanted a flavor component to your apple cider vinegar and you weren't necessarily thinking medicinal property, blueberries, strawberries, raspberries, all of those domestic berries would work really, really well for this too. So here is my aronia berry vinegar. And I'll give it a really good shake all throughout the day as the berries are still thawing. And here is my rosehip infused vinegar. Aren't they absolutely gorgeous? Now you're going to want them to sit. So any infused vinegar, and the fancy pants herbal term for these are acetics. So if you ever see that, then you know what we're talking about. You're going to want these to sit for a minimum of 3 weeks, ideally 4 weeks, because I'm running low. I'm probably going to strain these after 3 weeks. So one of the ways you can kind of speed up the infusion process is by remembering to give them a really good shake every single day. And that just helps to speed up the extraction process, because what the vinegar is doing is it's pulling all of those beautiful vitamins and minerals and medicinal properties out of the berries and into the vinegar. So you want to label them, put a date so that way you remember when you made them, especially if you like to make a whole lot of concoctions in jars. The last thing you want are a bunch of things floating around without dates on them. It really helps to remember when to strain them. And then all you're going to want to do is just like over my shoulder there, see, like a strainer like that, a measuring cup, strainer, pour it out. And if you really want to reserve as much of it as possible, you're going to want some way to kind of squeeze those berries. So you can use cheesecloth if you want with the aronia berries. It will absolutely stain your hands purple. So be forewarned. You could use something like a potato ricer, a juice press, whatever you've got, right? You know, the back of a soup ladle and press it down and try to get as much of that goodness out as possible. I then store them right back in mason jars with plastic lids, and you want to try to use it up in about a year. Well, there you have it, folks. We have just made 2 herbal infused raw apple cider vinegars to help support our digestive system and overall health. If you've got any questions or comments, you know what to do. Leave those below. And until next time, this is Correne from Spiraea Herbs, wishing you health and wellness.